Back in April, Anna Polina Luna, House Oversight Committee, she wrote a memo requesting 46 high-resolution color videos. I believe one of them was a disc-shaped craft that pulled up right next to the cockpit window, and the pilots were able to look out. There was a transparent section of the disc, and they could see the occupants inside, and then the thing flies off. There's so much stuff that needs to be released, and what we're getting is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, it's actually being recognized by the government. I've been wrong my entire life. These people that are talking about UFOs might actually be onto something.
If you take human evolution and fast forward at 1 million years, then the gray, large head, gigantic eyes, that is the direction that human beings, if given the chance, will evolve into. They could be time travelers from our future that are coming back here to kind of guide us so that they don't disrupt the future that they're from. You know, this was 4,000 years before the Mayan civilization even began. Technologically, not very sophisticated, yet they have all these intricate carvings that show all kinds of strange things. One stone in particular has these alien faces. They look like grays.
In my opinion, I believe that wholeheartedly that the government knows, and they've just passed off a lot of information to private entities.
The start of our civilization, it started with these megalithic structures that we can't even build today. That just makes no sense to me. So obviously there was another technologically advanced society, whether they were humans, maybe they were ETs, maybe they were something else that was here.
Matt, welcome back for another episode of The Cameron Brown Show. I think this is going to be like episode 78 or 79. I'm not entirely sure quite yet, but this is going to be a really fun one for as a follow-up episode to the last one with John, in which that episode has done very well, and it's gotten a lot of great visibility online. It seems like there's a lot of people that are interested in UFOs and the UAPs, whatever we want to refer to them as nowadays, and obviously just the unknown. But I appreciate you coming back for another episode.
Cameron, thank you so much for having me back. Yeah, I'm very excited about being here with you tonight.
Fantastic. Well, Matt, we both know there's a million different directions we can go in, and you brought up some interesting rocks at the very beginning of our introduction tonight. So I want to kind of just start there because I think that's a good transition from the previous episode and what was experienced by John and what you've now heard more about, learned more about, etc. So let's start there, and then we'll take this conversation in a bunch of different fun directions tonight, based off of all your experiences.
Right on.
Right.
So yeah, last week, or actually a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a gentleman who I don't know if he saw your podcast or one of the other presentations that I did, but he saw the John's video. So if you'll recall, there was that 100 frame section that Stephen Leah had analyzed, and he broke down these streaming heads coming out of what essentially was a toroidal spin feature or wormhole, and really creepy. It's probably the most creepy part of the whole video. Yeah. And so anyway, this gentleman sent me some links to this scientist named Trevor Hawk. Okay. He is working with some archaeologists. They uncovered these stones down in Jalisco, Mexico, which is central Mexico. They've carbon dated these stone carvings to about 8,500 years ago. And this one stone in particular has these alien faces. They look like grays, just the heads, and it looks identical to this streaming, what Stephen calls the craniomaxillofacial amalgamates.
Yeah, say that 5 times fast. Right. Holy cow. Right. I've tried everything that he sent over to us. I've tried to just like read through it really quickly, and I'm like, I can't. I have to take my time to better understand what he's sharing with us, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
Right. Absolutely. So this really caught my eye, and I sent it over to Stephen, and he looked at it, and he was really blown away by the whole thing, and he did some runs on the actual picture and found some interesting things. But what I thought was interesting is this rock, they carbon dated, like I said, to 8,500 years ago. At the time, this was 4,000 years before the Mayan civilization even began. So these people that were living in central Mexico at that time were hunter-gatherers. They were just getting over the Ice Age, technologically, not very sophisticated, and yet they have all these intricate carvings that show all kinds of strange things, including these alien heads. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Fantastic. Are you doing another deep dive into this right now, or is this just another experience, another conversation you're having on a day-to-day basis, or is this something you're actually going to spend a lot of time on moving forward?
There are a lot of tangents that I go off on,
Yep.
and I just have to kind of curb my my enthusiasm, so to speak,
Well, welcome
and
to
tr-
Tangent
and
Central, Matt. That's what we do
you
here.
know,
This is
um,
fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely something that I'd like to research a little further.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. But maybe not 10 months on a specific topic like you did with John.
You never know.
You never know. You never know. Yeah, there are so many different things to pick and choose from, and I think when on my YouTube deep dives on an evening, I can find something new. I went back to crop circles recently because I just had this, for whatever reason. I was like, I know about crop circles. I've watched plenty of videos on crop circles, but I after watching one of the Y-Files episodes, I didn't realize that I didn't really deep dive into crop circles like I wanted to. They were kind of diving into and talking about during the Y-Files episode how the British, the group of individuals that were creating the crop circles, had a lot of unknowns about them. They would create them, but they couldn't create them perfectly. They basically, after one was created, they'd act like they did it, but it was very clearly not them. There's just a lot of deception involved with the crop circles. So I do kind of want to start there, oddly enough, because crop circles has become a topic that I've thought a lot about as of late, but don't really know which direction to go in, even though it seems like a lot of them happen in the UK in general. But would love to know your general thoughts on crop circles.
Well, it's interesting. I think back in the 80s when they started appearing, there was a lot of research into them. And then right off the bat, it seems like you had those two guys that admitted that they staged the whole thing, and they took, I think, the BBC news crew out and with a board with a couple of ropes tied onto it and showed how they mashed down the patterns. But and because of that, everybody kind of dismissed it, like, oh, crop circles are solved, and it really tainted all of the research from there on, because it um, kind of lost credibility. But
Right.
in actuality, the researchers that have continued to this day, they've noticed some significant characteristics to actual crop circles that are really unexplained. They're not these um, wheat strands of wheat are not broken. They are like molecularly changed,
Like
so that
intertwined, right?
right, yeah, so that not only on the surface, but so on the surface they're bent, but they're formed like that, like the molecules in the stem actually curve. They're not broken. And the same goes to the root systems. When they dig these things up, they notice that it actually curves the opposite direction. So there's some kind of polarity that's involved there. And that's one of the key signs that it versus the real versus the hoax
Right.
version. So I've
Well,
always found that really fascinating.
it seemed like they immediately, whoever it was that wanted to cover this up, was like, hey guys, listen, this is what you're going to do. We're going to pay you a bunch of money. You're going to be the crop circle guys. It's kind of what it seems like. We're just to put, to keep people from going down this rabbit hole or thinking there's any validity to this. We just want you to go start making crop circles and make it seem like it's something you're doing. But it was very clear that none of their crop circles were perfectly aligned like the actual crop circles. They were not perfectly symmetrical in any way, shape, or form at any point with any of them that they did. But people could very clearly tell later on, they're like, there's no way that you're making these. There's no
Right.
way.
Yeah, and the thing is, they stay there for years, even after the crop's been harvested. 2 or 3 years later, it's still there. So I think that's really cool. And then they've had cases where farmers have been out in their fields and they make a pass and they turn around, and all of a sudden there is this gigantic crop circle that has just instantly appeared
Right.
in seconds. I mean, and this would take somebody days or weeks to mimic these intricate patterns.
But wasn't it though that we sent out basically a message into the universe, and then with the message that returned basically just showed their planet. It was like carbon, I believe, or it basically was just showing like the kind of civilization that exists there. But it was like 27 light years away, and I think we got it like 29 or 30 years later, literally.
Right, and it was I think it was SETI that sent that out,
Yep.
Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and it basically had, it showed the human DNA, the um, it, and then also, where we are within our star system, and I think they located, or they basically put a binary map of where we are based off of a bunch of pulsars
Right.
in the area. So, and yeah, it was returned, but it was when the return image that was in the crop circle was modified a little bit. And I can't recall exactly what the modifications were, but it was basically their version of the same thing back to us.
But
To
it
some
looks like an
extent.
ET versus a human. Like ours was like looks like a human. Theirs like looks like an ET.
Correct.
And there were some other things that were changed. That to your point.
Yeah, and there was a warning with it, if I'm not mistaken, about technology or something like that.
It seems like the warning keeps popping up across the board. And it seems
Mhm.
like the warning comes from, and I talked about that kind of at length with Kathleen on the last episode. And, it seems like the experiencers across the board, the vast majority of which are given a warning of some kind about how, we are treating the planet, about treating the planet better, being better to the environment, being careful around nuclear weapons. And obviously this pops up all the time, but it seems like a lot of these things started occurring after World War II, kind of around World War II and after World War II. So it's very clear that there's a nuclear connection of sorts. But is that been from a lot of your experiences and conversations you've had with experiencers? Has that been pretty much the same thing, or is it,
O-
going in different
occasion,
directions?
Occasionally there'll be a message like that with the experiences I've worked with. Similar to the Ariel school incident that happened,
Right.
Rua, Zimbabwe, back in 1994, I believe. Where the children were given the message, take care of the planet. Nuclear weapons are bad. You're polluting. You're putting pollutants into the atmosphere, and so it was a warning, a global warming sent through message to these children. Um, I've had one or two that were similar to that, but I can tell you across the board, uh, when these experiencers tell me about their abductions, it's always telepathic communication from the ETs or the beings. I'm not sure if they're even extraterrestrial. They may be from here for all we know, but they're given the message across the board. Pretty much, you have a job to do. And I know this was similar to what John experienced, the message
Right.
that he received. So you have a job to do, you have a mission. One experience said they told him, you agreed to this, which I thought was interesting.
His
um,
soul agreed to it.
yeah, and another person told me that they told them, when the time comes, you will have a purpose. And then another experiencer said that they were told they have a special purpose. So it's really interesting. So yeah, definitely there's the environmental and the nuclear aspect of that. But it seems like these experiencers, these abductees and contactees, that they're chosen for a reason. And and a lot of times when I talk to them, there's nearly always a generational link. Like either they've caught their kids saying something. This one experiencer said that her granddaughter drew out of the blue, like 4 years old, drew a picture of a gray, big eyes, round, head. And she asked, what was that? And she said, the granddaughter said, I went on a spaceship last night, and this is who took me. So,
Wild.
yeah. And then also in the other direction, grandparents or parents that have had the same experiences. And, those older generations are kind of tight-lipped about it. I think that, the stigma for them is huge.
Right.
Nowadays we're getting more and more experiencer cases because, things like the Pentagon UFO releases that we've had in the last month and a half. it's kind of empowered people to come out and tell their stories. And we are in Florida. We are inundated with experiencer cases right now. We've got well, now we have 5 of us that are on the experiencer resource team, the ERT. That's the um, organization within MUFON that Kathleen Martin she established. That was because of her. But yeah, we're getting a lot now. So much so that we can barely we can barely handle it.
Yeah, and I think this is where like I'm trying not to go too far down any specific rabbit hole necessarily, because I know there's a million different directions we can take this in. But you mentioned earlier just to talk about this, and I did talk about this with Kathleen too. But extra, ultra, and interdimensional; those seem to be like the 3 keywords right now. Are there any others that I'm missing just from that list before we kind of dive into those?
Well, Dr. Michael P. Masters, he's a professor. I think he's an anthropology professor in, I don't know if it's University of Montana, but he's written several books. One of them was called The Extraterrestrial. I don't know, was that one of the ones that you talked about?
Extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, and interdimensional.
Okay, so
you said extra, what was that?
Extraterrestrial. So what Dr.
Haven't
Michaels...
heard that one yet.
Yeah, what Dr. Michaels has theorized is that if you take human evolution and fast forward at 1 million years, then the gray, the archetypal gray being, large head, gigantic eyes, small ears, small mouth, small nose, that is the direction that human beings, if given the chance, will evolve into. And so his theory is that they could be time travelers from our future that are coming back here to kind of guide us so that they don't disrupt the future that they're from.
So that would be its own category then, is what we're basically saying. It would not be
correct.
Of the other 3 in any way, shape, or form. But they could also slightly be interdimensional if they were traveling using dimensional portals.
I think the interdimensional part really boils down to the way that they travel. And, obviously they're, if they're from somewhere else, they are exceeding the limits that Einstein established with the speed of light. We know that can be broken, first of all, when they were able to demonstrate Einstein's entanglement theory, or what he called spooky X, at a distance. They realized that, hey, these entangled particles, no matter how far away they are in the universe, if you adjust the spin and polarity of one, the other one instantly changes to match, and that exceeds the speed of light. So there must be some other form of communication in between there. So so I think that maybe the mode of travel that these entities are using could be interdimensional.
Like some form of quantum entanglement of some kind that's allowing.
Very well could be.
Okay.
And then going back to John's video, and then we may have talked about this, before on the episode with him, but that those stream of heads that are coming out of that wormhole inside the craft, that's you can't see with the naked eye, but with this quantum analysis, they become visible. I've often thought that it's possible that is some form of like transmission that creates a solid object in our world, or maybe it's the same universe that these beings are from. But if you could imagine like Star Wars, I hate to bring up science fiction analogies, especially when we're talking about stuff seriously. But I mean,
Star Trek and Star Wars,
right?
We've already all that technology exists, right? Has that not been already said by multiple military, members of the
absolutely,
military community multiple times? Like,
right.
It's very clear that it exists. We're just not privy to it.
Right,
so
absolutely.
That's my personal opinion, at least.
So I thought that maybe this is something like the hologram technology in Star Wars, when they can beam a transmission, live transmission across the galaxy, and you can have a 3-dimensional view of this person that's kind of a blue ghost-like figure, but then you can interact. And I thought, what if whatever is coming out of this wormhole is the actual matrix that makes up the reality aboard that ship? Maybe it's what's creating that ship so that we can see. And it's, physical, it takes physical form, but it's a transmitted physical form. And then, I mean, you could also use the other analogy of the Star Trek holodeck. You know, it's while they're in there, it's real. You can touch things. You know, they have mass, but they're actually an illusion. And I thought, well, maybe that's part of their technology that that they're using. So, but just complete conjecture. You know, it's all bizarre and beyond. I think our level of understanding, even at the uh, you know PhD level. So,
But it is
um,
fun to try to understand what's going on.
yeah, different.
And it's fun to ask questions, and it's fun to
Mhm.
go down these rabbit holes and have these conversations. I think a lot of people will get caught up in it too. And this is like one of the biggest things that I'm trying to get across, and especially these episodes right now too, is it's okay to go down the rabbit holes, but you kind of have to figure out a way back to base reality, at least to like understand that, like, yes, these things are possible, but this is where we are right now, and that's okay too, and to have some level of discernment between what is true and what's not. And I keep hearing, I've heard this a couple of times now, that there's like a lot of infiltration. And I asked Kathleen about this as well. There's a lot of infiltration into groups like MUFON, I'll just put it out there, and into other organizations to try to discredit the work that you all are doing by basically putting bad actors within the groups. Like, this happens in the government, this happens in any organization, right? Where there are obviously malicious, malevolent groups that want to discredit those who are actually doing good work. And that tends to be when you're hovering over the truth, right? Just in general.
Right.
So I would love for you to address that as well. I'd love to know your thoughts on potential bad actors, other countries that are trying to place individuals within organizations that are doing good work like this. But how do you all address that and help with people trying to discern between what is right and what is wrong that they hear about?
Well, I mean, as far as our field investigators, we've got 20 field investigators in Florida. They're vetted pretty well. They all get background checks and then we're working side by side with them every day. Uh, Mostly virtual, but we do get to meet in person every once in a while. But they're well established, and they're doing phenomenal work. So we really haven't had a case where I suspected that there was maybe um, you know some misdirection or some misrepresentation.
Right.
I haven't had that at all since I've been state director for Florida. But not to say that it couldn't occur. But I think MUFON does a really good job of vetting, people. If you have anything in your background, chances are you won't make it to the field investigator level. So any kind of criminal record for sure. But yeah.
Well, it seems like it's a lengthy process too to become like a member of the team as well. And obviously, you've got a lot of credibility with your background and all that you've done. But it is good to know that it's such a lengthy process to get involved and to be able to join the team accordingly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, cool. We talked about all the things that were seen in John's video before: the frogs, the reptilians, the grays, all the experiences there. I want to go to the Nordics for a bit and talk about the Nordics, because I don't feel like we've discussed, like, people keep mentioning the Nordics, but I don't think people really understand like the structure here that is being observed. So what are your thoughts on the Nordics? And then let's just kind of dive into each category from there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, of course, and I can't remember if we talked about it on the program with John last time, but he had an experience with Nordic in New York City. Does
We
that
did
ring a
not
bell?
discuss that, but that's good to know.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and share that, John. I hope
Right.
it's okay that I share this. I'm sure he won't
He's still
mind.
anonymous anyway,
Yeah,
so it
yeah,
is what it is.
right. But this, I can't remember what year. It was back in the late '80s, early '90s, perhaps. But he was, um, and I'm doing this from memory. I don't have any notes on this, so John, forgive me. But this is the gist of it: is he was walking along Columbus Avenue on the west side of Central Park in New York City. He got to a crosswalk, and he said it was absolutely jammed. There were hundreds of people around, and there was this one person that on the opposite side of the street that very tall, like 7-ish, maybe more, feet tall, uh, blonde hair. He said that he looked like the male model Fabio. He had a leather bomber jacket on, and he said that when the light changed, and John noticed this being. At the time, he was reading UFO books and stuff. He had all these experiences throughout his life, so he was familiar with a lot of the what's going on with ufology. And he said that when he saw this individual, the thought that popped into his head, that's a Nordic. And he said the minute he thought that, he said this blonde, Fabio looking gentleman turned and like locked eyes with him and stared at him the whole time. And then when they got to the other side of the street, John, stopped, and the crowd dissipated, and he turned around and he said that that person was standing on the opposite corner just staring him down, and then he turned around and got out of there pretty quick. But so that's one Nordic story that was pretty cool.
I watched another one recently. A guy that said he saw one on it was actually, he went on Jesse Michaels' show, and he mentioned to Jesse Michaels that he saw a Nordic on an island in Washington State, right outside of Seattle, and said he saw a Nordic, and basically like they locked eyes telepathically. The Nordic told him to turn around, and he turned around immediately. But apparently there's like this lore on this particular island that there are, the Nordics were like, there was like a Nordic that walked into a bar and had like a couple drinks with the people at the bar, and the guys at the bar all talk about it all the time. So it's just kind of interesting to hear kind of stories like that. But it was the Nordics kind of kept to themselves in this like gated community of sorts that was more military and government oriented on that particular island in Seattle. So I'm not sure if you've heard of anything like that throughout your studies.
Now I can't remember where I heard it from, and it maybe have been the same Jesse Michaels episode that you were watching. But yeah, there was some. I guess there was one of the. Actually, they weren't Nordics; they were humans. That there was a group of humans that I guess had been. Their ancestors were enslaved thousands of years ago. They were taken off, maybe by the Nordics. They were taken off Earth, and then they were brought back, and then some of them had escaped, and they're living among us. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I'm sorry I don't have more details on that, but
yeah, that's a good one for an entire episode as well. So
yeah, absolutely. There were some. I did a experiencer case last year with a gentleman, very, very credible. I won't mention his line of work because I don't want him to be identified in any way, but he reported a historical abduction. This was 1978, I think August of 1978. And at the time, he was in the Navy. He was stationed at Naval Air Station Key West, which is in Boca Chica. Interesting. That's right there where John's incident took place. But like I said, this was the late 70s. He worked. He was a airman in the Navy, so enlisted guy. Worked on these RAF or RF-4Cs, I believe. Or possibly A5s, but the fighter jets down there back in the day. He got a weekend pass. His fiancée lived in Fort Lauderdale, and so Friday evening he left the base and started driving on A1A up to the Florida Keys. When he got just south of Marathon, he noticed a weird group of lights that he said they were roiling, just spinning around each other. And he kept his eye on them, and they at some point shot off and went below the horizon to the north. So at this point, where the Florida Keys are, the Florida Keys down in that area, kind of, even though it's A1A is northbound, the highway is actually kind of east-west at that point before it curves up to go to Miami. So these things sped off to the north, and so he was so amazed by it, he got to a bridge just before Marathon called Little Duck Key, and the bridge was called the Knights Key Bridge. And he pulled off. He went over it, and there were some fishermen standing on the bridge. He parked on the north side, or really the east side, and walked out onto the bridge to talk to these fishermen. And the fishermen had seen these lights too, and they started talking about it. while they were talking about it, they started noticing that on the south side of the bridge, um, they started hearing their voices echo off of something. And so these fishermen, I think, may have been drinking. And so they started, in his words, the experiencer's words, he said they started hooting and hollering and just to listen to their voice
That
back.
aligns with Florida.
Right,
That makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, Florida man.
Yeah.
And so the experiencer decided to yell out. He said, "Come on down." And he said, as soon as he said that, this gigantic silver disc materialized right in front of them, and he started hearing a tapping sound. He looked over, the fishermen were frozen in place, and there were these orbs that started these like golf ball sized lights that started circling his body at his feet. And as they started to move up, I mean, he became paralyzed. And as they started to get to where his face was, as these things would come by, he could see the bridge and the fishermen, but then he could also see superimposed on that another reality. And then eventually when these orbs got above his head, like he was not on the bridge anymore. He was standing inside of a room, possibly the spaceship that was hovering there. He said it was gigantic. There were 3 beings, two males and 1 female. The female was in the center. The males were flanking her, but he described them, they kind of like Nordics. They walked over to him, and the female entity walked. He said they were beautiful. All of them were beautiful. Walked right up to his face, and he thought to himself, "Who are you?" And in his head, he heard, "We are the Watchers." And that's his last memory. And his next memory is, now this was a Friday night, his next memory was standing in the barracks at the Naval Air Station on Monday morning in uniform, getting ready to go to work. Absolutely no memory of what happened over the weekend. I suspect that he probably went to visit his fiance in Fort Lauderdale and had a normal weekend, and then but his memory didn't come back until Monday morning. So
That's wild.
yeah.
And the Watchers get brought up often, especially in like the Book of Enoch too.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that Anna Paulina Luna, she's on the House Oversight Committee,
Yep.
and she's also on this. I can't remember the exact title, but it's the committee for release of overclassification or classified items, and
Right.
so JFK, Epstein, and then UFO, and one of her tweets, I think earlier this year, mentioned the Book of Enoch. And of course, and I know you've read it. Lots of other of your listeners have, but the Book of Enoch mentions the Watchers. They are like a human angelic hybrid called the Nephilim, and that's their whole thing. They're with us, and they're watching over us. So.
Yeah, it's just the more that I do this too, and I don't know. There are like moments where I kind of freeze up. And I'm like, oh my gosh! So you just connect the dots on things too, and you hear of an experience that specific. And you're like, wow, that's a very specific example of the Watchers, or once again the Nephilim, or these creatures or these beings. And obviously the Bible mentions the Nephilim specifically. And so when you kind of cross-reference different texts and experiences with one another, and they all start to come together in your brain. It's like the dots start to connect, and you're like, wow, there really is something here. There is more going on. I've heard about it for a long time, but it's hard to connect all the dots with just little bits of information. So the more that I gather, the more I'm amazed with how connected all of this is. Yeah. I want to touch on this real quick from a spirituality and a religious perspective. I obviously am. Personally, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, dramatically believe in God at this point in my life. I think more than anything, the more that I learn, the more I'm like, yeah, God's definitely real, 100%. I was like, God created all these things, and all these things are wonderful. We just are evolving to slowly better understand them, is kind of what my opinion is of it. But I would like to know what kind of your spiritual transformation has been like, maybe throughout learning all of these things and just over time as well, if you don't mind sharing.
Not at all. Let's see.
What's
let
a
me
good
go.
place to start?
I guess probably when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I grew up, originally I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. My parents, at some point, I think probably when I was in my early teens, decided that they were tired of hellfire and damnation, and they decided to start going to a Methodist church. So I was raised in a Methodist church. I went through, studied and went through the confirmation process, and then I think at some point in my life, probably later on in high school, I just had these questions like, a lot of the stuff within, the Bible, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I kind of drifted away. And then in 1993, my and I don't want to go back. I kind of had lost my feeling for, well, maybe this is all, BS.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 1992. I'm 25 years old. My dad had been diagnosed with cancer, and I was with him when he passed. And when I was holding his hand, and when he took his last breath, he sat straight up, looked up at the ceiling, and I cannot even begin to describe what I felt. I felt his soul leave his body, and then I knew he was gone. And the body that I was sitting there holding hands with, that wasn't my dad anymore, because I experienced my dad's transformation from this world to the next, and it changed me spiritually. It had a dramatic effect, and from that day on, I realized, wow, I don't have anything to worry about. There is another side. I don't know what's on the other side, but I don't have to worry about if there is or not. I know there is,
Right.
and so it's comforted. It's comforted me for 30 plus years. But and so I think that's where I am today. I don't know what is there, but I do know that it's there, and it's good.
Yeah, and it's grand and it's huge. It's big.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think I'm right there with you. I just know that it is, and you're like that's a very comforting feeling for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems to come up a lot with a lot of my conversations, especially with people's upbringing and how they've transformed over time and the different things they've experienced and their perspective and their belief systems. And I like to dive into that a little bit because I think it's super important, especially as we are all starting to come closer together and learn more about each other, and people are becoming what seems to be a lot more authentic as time goes on too, and as especially a lot of these older experiencers are starting to share their experiences as well.
Absolutely.
I think this is just super important to have this conversation too.
Right.
So I appreciate you sharing. With that, I don't know how much it throws people off, but there are a lot of people, it seems like in the church nowadays too, that that are frustrated with the physical church too, the building of the church, right? And because of the fact that they've been led astray for so long by human beings. I'm like, you can't. Human beings are going to lead you astray regardless. I was like,
Right.
we're in a world full of deception and hatred and all these different sinful behaviors, right? I was like, but it's just amazing to me that people still trust in humans so much, I guess, at the end of the day, as it relates to their spirituality and their beliefs. It's there's so much more to believe in, and you're able to do that. You don't have to follow a certain human all day,
Right.
every day.
Yeah, of course.
But I'll digress from that topic. That's an entirely different podcast. Back to experiences, specifically, in regards to all the research that you've done. Are there a couple other cases that you tend to want to share because you think they have a profound impact on what people people trying to understand what's going on? But are there a couple of different experiences that you tend to share with most people to help them to better understand, hey, this is all very real. This is being experienced by people at all levels?
Yeah, what's interesting is most of the experiencers that I work with, they're all professional. They're all super intelligent. They have that in common pretty much across the board. What's interesting is there's a big connection with Native American and indigenous peoples. I don't know what that is. Not all, but I'd say probably 30 to 40% of the experiencers I talk to have some kind of Native American, indigenous heritage, or Canadian indigenous heritage. I thought that was interesting, and it's Lou Elizondo, when he wrote his book a few years ago, Imminent, he spoke about that too. The members on the UAP task force, I think all of them were descendants of the Cherokee, or had some kind of connection to Cherokee. So I know that you know, Native American spirituality, and I mean that comes into play. And I don't know if there's a specific gene that makes them more connected, or what. But I found that very interesting. The other thing that I found interesting was there's a nuclear connection, not so much a warning, but it's the within the family of some of these experiencers. So one experience I worked with, one of their parents worked for the Reagan administration, and had some input on some of the non-nuclear proliferation agreements, START, and some of those. And then another experience of their I think their father was a nuclear submarine commander. There's another experiencer that grew up next to or near I think it's the Susquehanna nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. And then, like, all of their family, had worked there since its inception, and so I thought that was an interesting connection. But yeah, the nuclear thing is odd, and it's not just craft hovering over a nuclear power plant or shutting down nuclear missiles. I mean, now they're dealing with people that just have some kind of loose, maybe a profound connection or even a loose connection to nuclear power. But
is there also there's something to be said though for, you mentioned obviously the spirituality of the Indian community, and I think that's certainly a part of it. I've been seeing stuff as well recently about the psychic abilities and the spiritual abilities of those that live in more rural areas and or are more disconnected from like the larger populations. Maybe that has to do with like 5G and other things as well, and different signals being sent out in mass to large groups of people. But it seems like a lot of experiences and a lot of things actually happen to people that are in more like rural areas as well. Have you seen that connection at all?
Honestly, I think it's about 50-50. I mean, some of these abductions occur, over really populated areas, where you'd think that there would be hundreds of witnesses. But I'm sure you and many of the people watching your podcast have seen, Bob Lazar, the S4, documentary.
Great documentary.
One of the things that really struck me with that was when Bob Lazar was talking about, when they were flying the sport model, and he walked out of the hangar, and his supervisor told him to go and walk underneath it. And as he walked underneath it, it disappeared. And then he thought, oh, it flew away. And then he took a few steps back, and it reappeared. So these things obviously have the ability to bend or light somehow, or manipulate light, or reflected light. And so I think that's how they get away with doing this stuff in like really populated areas. I had an experiencer that I worked with back in 2023. She was abducted back in the 90s in Chicago, right next to O'Hare Airport in Schaumburg. And they pulled her out of the bedroom in the middle of the night and took her aboard a craft, and she was examined. And then she was put into a larger room where she was with other abductees. And she said above them there was a whole bunch of like observation windows, and she could see these grays that were looking, many of these beings that were looking down at whatever they were doing. And then she was put into like a coffin-like tube, and the next thing she knew, she woke up in her bed.
Wow.
But it would.
There's so many of them though. There's like so many of these experiencers that, especially now, to your point earlier, there are a lot more coming forward. But there's so many of these people across the board. This is and just a lot of just these people are. This is from Florida specifically.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so I can't imagine what other states are like for MUFON as well.
What's interesting is one of the questions that we ask is, if you had the chance, would you like your abduction experiences or your contact experiences to end? And pretty much across the board, they all say no. And it's kind of not, yeah, I didn't expect it at first, but then when, I ask dozens of people and they all give me the same answer, that basically they all say, yeah, it's uncomfortable. I feel like I'm, being violated. However, I want to know why.
Right.
And the only way to try to figure that out is to have them continue. So that's very interesting. I mean, these people are essentially getting kidnapped out of their homes multiple times. Not to mention that just about every woman that I work with who has had these experiences, they all have some kind of reproductive health issue in their life. Unexplained surgeries. One woman told me she went to her OBGYN, and after an examination, the physician said, "You didn't tell me that you had tubal ligation surgery." And she said, "I didn't. I've never had surgery." And he looked at her like she was, lying to him. There are lots of women that tell me that, oh, they were unable to conceive until after an abduction, and then they were able to get pregnant, or the opposite of that. They'd had children, and then all of a sudden they can't. They go to the OBGYN, and they're told, oh, you will never have children because there's too much scar tissue,
Right.
that kind of thing. And then very rarely there is a missing pregnancy, and that is absolutely horrific, for these women. A lot of miscarriages as well. So, I mean, it takes its toll on these people. I mean, it's not it. I mean, we have to take this seriously because it is. A lot of these people are so traumatized by this.
Right. And I asked that question, Kathleen. I said, "Are these benevolent creatures and beings?" And it seemed like, in general, that a lot of these creatures do seem to be benevolent. It seems like they do have good intentions. She referred to it or compared it to like taking your dog into the vet and helping your dog to like stay, cure an illness or to upgrade your dog's health in some way. We are kind of like those pets or those animals or creatures to whoever this is or whatever this is. And to a certain degree, I kind of aligned with that. I was like, I get that. Like, but in like the miscarriage situation where they're not actually curing something, they're actually causing an issue. That makes me think that there is obviously some negative energy in addition to the positive energy. There might be a little bit of both going on here across the board.
Yeah, and there's many abductees, experiencers that have had missing pregnancies, and I have not worked with an experiencer that had this, but there's certainly many documented cases of this where they are taken aboard a craft and then they're shown like a human ET hybrid, and they're told this is yours, and they need them to help nurture this baby, and to me, it's heartbreaking. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. So, and when you talk to these people, you can hear it in their voice. When somebody is pulling your leg or trying to, making up a story. These people, first of all, they tell the same stories, and a lot of things that I won't even mention here that because I don't want to kind of muddy the waters for people, but yeah, you can hear it in their voice. It's a traumatic event for them, and in some cases, like, they live their whole lives with this, and they can't tell anybody. A lot of times, their family members, they try to tell their family members, and their family members cannot deal with it. They tell their friends, and then they're not friends with them anymore. And then obviously, if they bring it up at work, they have the risk of losing their jobs. So, and I'm so fortunate. I'm so humbled by having these people tell me, their story, because a lot of times they'll tell me, "Hey, this is the first time I've ever told anyone," and boy, I tell you, I just it just gets me. I just feel for these people, and I try to do everything I can to reassure them and
Well, I think this is really good too. And once again, whoever's listening to this as well has obviously an outlet. They have people to go talk to, right? Like yourself, and that are not going to judge you too. And there's like a therapist, and then there's this, right? I don't know how many people even tell their therapist these things either. But I even think about, like, for myself, like growing up with, night terrors and other things that occurred that I rarely talked with people about. And I'm starting to open up a lot more about them now because I feel more comfortable doing it, because I'm comfortable in my own skin now. But it wasn't always the case, right? But I think a lot of that takes time, regardless of the experience, to be able to open up about it and share it with people. So it's good on people to be actually able to share these stories and experiences, especially with individuals like yourself, who can then help them to realize they're not alone either. But a lot of this, when I think about this, I think about human trafficking too. A lot of that's, it obviously maybe a big part of this, and we just don't fully understand it. But it is obviously very traumatic experience for those individuals, and they need somebody to talk to, and typically somebody who's, experienced it is helpful. But even the experiencers too don't want to talk about it all the time, probably either.
right, absolutely, yeah, it's traumatic.
Yeah, very. You mentioned off-world experiences earlier. What are your thoughts on the moon? I want to kind of lighten the topic just a little bit here. What are your thoughts on the moon and all the anomalies, weird things that happen with the moon and the lunar surface and spacecraft, etc.?
Yeah, I think what was it? I can't remember. It was Apollo 12. One of the, it was one of the later
Apollo 12
Apollo
or 13
missions.
that dropped the
Yeah,
payload onto the moon and then heard it ring,
yeah,
basically.
they basically they crashed the lunar module
Yep.
onto the moon, and they had all these seismic instruments set up, and you've heard it rang like a bell for like
Yep.
an hour, and I know they've done a bunch of those. So it indicates that the moon is sort of hollow. Sounds kind
I've
of
brought
crazy,
this up
but
to a number of
yeah,
folks recently, and they're like,
yeah,
"Cameron, what are you talking about? Like, we've gone
yeah,
way too far down the road."
yeah.
I'm like, "But this is public information. The moon is hollow, according to NASA."
Right, right.
What do you do
And
with that information?
and then, I mean, there's all these weird anomalies with it. I mean, the chances of, I mean, look, every time we have a solar eclipse and the moon passes in front of the sun, the chances of, from our vantage point, the sun and the moon being like the exact size, I mean, a total eclipse just does not happen. I mean, I suspect that it is extraordinarily rare throughout our galaxy for that to even happen, and yet it happens to us, and we just take it for granted. Oh, the sun and the moon are roughly the same size, which I think is pretty weird. But you know, when you look into the remote viewers, specifically, Project Stargate. This was the Stanford Research SRI that was working with the CIA back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Ingo Swann, one of the most talented remote viewers, he did a lot and he was instructed to look at the moon. I think Lynn Buchanan, another one, he was the inspiration for the movie Men Who Stare at Goats. And I think he also, did some remote viewing on the moon and for the moon and Mars. And, they always come back and say, oh, yep, that's where these ETs, they have some kind of a base there. That's where and it's an excellent observation point, because it's, always facing us, and they can keep an eye on everything that we do. But yeah, I just thought that was fascinating. And these are all blind, tests with these remote viewers, and they're coming up with the same information. I guess the dark side of the moon supposedly has some dome-shaped bases, and
Right.
I was hoping that with Artemis 2, that they were going to pick up some of that, and who knows, maybe some of their cameras did, and they're just not, talking about it.
It sounds like they probably wouldn't share it either,
Mm,
even if they did see it.
right.
So with that, soul recycling and loosh, how familiar are you with those particular topics?
I'm not familiar at all.
Okay, that's another.
Yeah.
We'll leave that one for another
Mm,
day then,
mhm.
because that's another completely different rabbit hole that I
Okay.
started to kind of go down. And I'm like, this might be a little bit too far for me at this
But
point. I might need to take a step back. So
now you've given me another tangent to go down.
yeah, there you
So.
go. That's another one to look into. Fun one to look into.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So I just as a, I know we could do this for hours, and I want to be very respectful of your time. There's also a World Cup match going on right now that there may be something weird going on with. So you and I both saw the same Brazilian influencer with 26 million followers on Instagram. She's a psychic. She basically said that there's going to be an abduction with the World Cup match tonight between Scotland and Brazil. I don't know how I feel about that, but like any prediction, you don't know until it actually happens. So we'll see. But we do have that to go get to potentially observe. Hopefully that does not occur. But if it does, we'll at least be able to watch it on TV, I guess, for whatever
Absolutely.
that's worth. But just general overview here. First and foremost, if people have had an experience, they really should message me so I can message you, or just message you directly, right? So they can reach out to you and share their experience. I'm not the professional. Matt's the professional. So if you had an experience, you should definitely reach out to
Absolutely.
Matt Kellison at MUFON.
Yeah.
But what is your just general overview of all the things that you've observed up to this point? What do you think's going on? If you could just give me a high level view of what you believe to be going on within our universe, our reality, our experience, so on and so forth.
Well, I'll start with I started reading Graham Hancock years and years ago. And I'm just fascinated by, he has this theory. He's not an archaeologist. He's I can't. He's a researcher for sure. He's done a ton of books, and I know a lot of established, the academic world, and these mainstream archaeologists. They don't go along. They don't agree with most of what Graham Hancock says, but it's really fascinating. His theory is that there's something about 13,800 years ago called the Younger Dryas impact, and so that's the Younger Dryas impact theory. And his theory is that 13,800 years ago, a comet slammed into the Earth in the northern hemisphere, maybe somewhere around Greenland, instantly melted the ice caps, and water and ice just flowed over the European continent and then North America. And maybe that's what caused the Great Lakes to be formed. This sudden glacial expansion and melting of this. I can't remember. Randall Carlson calls it meltwater. Yeah, meltwater pulses, and that a lot of these megalithic structures predate that. And so we're talking about the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and we're talking about cities in Mesoamerica.
Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe is a perfect one. 10,000 or so years ago.
I just struggle saying these words sometimes, as I'm like,
right.
they're in my head, and just getting
Right.
them out, I just struggle with these. But.
So there was definitely some kind of advanced technology. My favorite one is Puma Punka, and this is in Bolivia. It's adjacent to Tiwanaku, which is the Tiwanaku civilization. They're on the south side of Lake Titicaca, so it's kind of the border of Peru and Bolivia. And what makes Puma Punka, which supposedly is older than Tiwanaku, because the people that live in that area, they through their verbal language that they passed this information down generation to generation, was that Tiwanaku was built using some of the stones from Puma Punka, and Puma Punka is much older than Tiwanaku. But the incredible thing is, and this is like 12,000 feet up, in in the Andes, and these stones, some of them weigh in excess of 100 tons, and there is extreme precision. I'm sure you've seen the H blocks are the popular one. They're these geometric shapes in the form of the letter H, but the geometry on them is absolutely perfect. Perfect 90-degree angles, completely smooth surfaces, and this is a level of technology that, and there's a lot of archaeologists say that that these things are not that old. They're certainly not BC era. That they're more that it's later than that. But what Graham Hancock, I know, believes that this was part of this ancient technologically advanced civilization. And when you look at, like I mentioned, that 100-ton, those 100-ton stones, they found the quarry where this gray andesite comes from, and it's thousands of feet down the mountain. Now, whether this was built, which I don't believe it was, but 400 AD or 10,000 BC,
Right.
it would be extremely difficult for us to move that stone thousands of feet up a mountain with no equipment. I mean, even with our best equipment, if we had the largest cranes and transport vehicles that we had, it would still be nearly impossible for us to transport that from the quarry up the thousands of feet up the mountain and then place it. That one has always struck me. So, and then you have, now on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, you've got Filippo Biondi. He's using this, it's called the side scan Doppler tomography, or aperture radar Doppler tomography. And he's using multiple satellites, so not just one, but multiple platforms to peer with this aperture radar underneath the pyramids, and he's discovered these spiral structures under one of the pyramids. It's not the Great Pyramid, Khufu. It's the one next to it, Khafre, the second largest. And he's found these 8 spiral columns that extend down, I think, 3,500 feet, so 2/3 of a mile underground. They're perfectly formed, and then they're at the bottom. They're sitting on this large box that's about the size of a football field, not a football stadium, but a football field. And this is, if this is true, it shows that whoever built the pyramids and this structure were maybe hundreds or thousands of years more advanced than we are right now. And so, based off of all of that information, I kind of think that maybe now, whether they originated from some other star system, I think they've been on Earth with us for tens of thousands of years. And so they're here. I mean, there's so many reports from the Navy, these things popping out of the water. And I kind of believe that, they're here. Maybe they're on the moon, but they're here with us all the time. So that's kind of the thing that makes the most sense to me.
Yep.
And there could be 100 other different species that are coming from different places or interdimensionally or coming back in time. Who knows? But that's just one theory. But that kind of makes the most sense to me. It explains all of these anomalous archaeological finds that just cannot be explained, and these one-offs that mainstream archaeology doesn't even take a look at. There is incredible information to be discovered there if we could just get rid of the dogma of, our civilization began with the Sumerians and the Babylonians, and then next came the Egyptians, and the start of our civilization, it started with these megalithic structures that we can't even build today. That just makes no sense to me. So obviously there was another technologically advanced society, whether they were humans, but maybe they were ETs, maybe they were something else that was here. I don't know, but that kind of um, helps me fit those two pieces of the puzzle together. Now, whether they go together or not, I don't know, but just all conjecture.
I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
Well, thanks to people like Graham Hancock
Mhm.
and Bob Lazar, and Stephen Greer, who I'm going to ask you about here in a minute too, and now Matt Kellison, I have like no fear discussing these things. Right? I
Right.
feel like I've done enough research. I've surrounded myself with people who are. Once again, following individuals like yourself and listening and having these conversations, like you're obviously a very intellectual individual. Like you've done your research, you've had these experiences, you've had these conversations. I don't know that people can, sure, you can discredit all you want. These are just conversations. These are things that people are experiencing. This is, to your point, there's some of this is conjecture, but why not ask the questions? Why not go down these roads? What's keeping you in such a tight-knit bubble? And I think my belief now is just very clear, is that ignorance is bliss to so many people, and understanding anything else that destroys their worldview is very difficult, and it really is. That in and of itself is traumatic too. So I think it is very difficult to a lot of people. But I would like to think that as a society in general, we are moving towards a place where we are going to have a better ability to assimilate and or adapt once these things do start to really come to light in a more profound way. But I'd like to think we're getting there. Do you agree with that or disagree with that statement?
I don't know.
Or you think we'll never be there? Maybe
I,
just because we're
I,
human, we'll never be there.
I don't know. And one of the messages that I don't believe I mentioned before from some of the experiencers I've worked with is that humanity needs to grow spiritually before we can ascend to that level that they are on. I just don't believe we're there. I mean, it's Joe Rogan always talks about we're monkeys with nuclear weapons, and in a sense that's kind of what we are. I mean, um, we live in this world that is beautiful and has incredible stories, and the people there are, for the most part, very loving. But then I go out on my way to the grocery store, and I experience people with road rage, and I think, oh my gosh, we are so lost as a civilization, like just chill out.
Yep.
But yeah, I wish we were there. I honestly don't think we are. I think some of us are, but I wish we could just put away our anger. The political divide in this country right now is nuts. It
Yep.
is absolutely nuts. And who knows? Maybe one of these, extraterrestrial civilizations, but whatever they are, maybe them showing up at over a soccer stadium is what we need, to bring everybody together. Reagan, I think, once said that during the speech of the UN that what if we could just all come together, and maybe if there was a threat from outside of our world that we all had to unite for. I That's a pretty dark view in itself. I hope that it's not like that either. But
Well, that gives me Project Bluebeam vibes, and I'm like, okay. I really
right,
hope
right,
that the president was not there. That was not his opinion.
right.
I think he was just saying it jokingly, but it's obviously been used
Absolutely.
by a
Yeah.
lot of people in this space to be like, oh, Project Bluebeam's absolutely happening. Like
Yeah.
it's coming, guys. Whether you like it or not, the president of the
Yeah.
United States literally made a comment about it. So,
Yeah.
but taken out of
I
context, to a degree.
I I guess I'm on the fence. I'd like to say I'm optimistic that if disclosure happens because of a craft landing and extraterrestrial beings or whatever they are, peacefully trying to reach out to everybody on this planet, I'd like to think that we would not try to destroy them. And I mean, you've got all these Pentagon videos that are coming out, and I believe one is the a fighter jet shooting down the whatever it was over Lake Huron, and I'm thinking, oh, then there's the Hellfire missile over in the Middle East that was leaked. The video was leaked from it, and I'm thinking, stop shooting at these things,
Wasn't the Hellfire missile the one that literally bounced off?
Yeah, it bounced off, and then the whatever broke off started flying in formation behind it, and there's some theories that that was just because the angle of the where the FLIR camera was pointed. I suppose it was on a drone, or it could have been on a fighter jet or another asset. But some conjecture is that it broke apart, and then those pieces that appear to be following the craft are actually free falling, and because of the angle, it just looks like they recover and they're flying off. With a lot of those Pentagon videos, they are almost meaningless to take at face value without more information, and it's just not there. Just a video on its own just doesn't help. But yeah, I wish we would stop shooting at these things. I understand for national security reasons, we need to protect our country. But if these things are really visitors from somewhere else, or a higher level being than us, it kind of sucks that we're taking shots at them.
Maybe a more soft power approach versus.
Yeah, I don't know what the world, what the answer is, but it seems like our world is on fire, and if I were the aliens, I'd probably look at the Earth and go, no thanks, we don't want anything to do with these crazy people. Yeah. But yeah.
If you don't mind, I want to do a little bit of a speed round to wrap this up.
Okay.
Some fun questions. They might require a lengthier answer, but if you can answer them quickly, that would be fun.
Okay.
I've never done this before, but it seems like there's a lot of thoughts in my head, so I might as well just throw them out there. Okay, so let's start here. How do you feel about Dr. Stephen Greer and the work he's done?
Well, I mean, he's certainly done a lot for the community. He's the one who organized that National Press Club. Yeah. Meeting back in I think it was the early 2000s, where he was able to get a lot of ex-government officials to come forward. I believe Robert Salas was one of them. That was the introduction of the UFOs, shutting down nuclear weapons. I think that was great. I mean, he established the CE5 protocol through meditation, that you can communicate with these beings and actually call them in.
It's a great app.
Yeah. The one thing that I don't like is these beings, whatever they are, these craft, these lights in the sky. We talked about Chris Bledsoe. Obviously, they're there, but the fact that I know Dr. Greer, this is what he does for a living, and he has these CE5 events, and he charges people money, and I think it's great work that he's doing, but I don't know, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way, that this is for humanity. I mean, nobody should be paying money in order to communicate with these other beings. And so he's probably a great guy, very knowledgeable, and he's done a lot for the community. But it was just that little thing that kind of, I just doesn't sit well with me.
I'll admit that's the thing that I'm struggling with right now, as it relates to like the podcast. And there are certain individuals I've had conversations with that I've basically said like, hey, this doesn't make any sense for us to do a podcast, even though you have a big following and you're a big part of this group and organization, politically, not politically, et cetera. Because I want to stay true to myself as much as possible throughout this process. Like ideally, eventually this does make some money from sponsorships and other things. That would be fantastic. But with anything like in this space, you're almost like, are you saying this to sensationalize just to get views and to make money? Or are you saying this because you believe it? Like, do you actually believe it? And I think that's the hardest part about discernment nowadays, especially when these groups become so about the money to fund what they're doing. But it also is just part of our life. We need money to exist in our world, unfortunately. But it's a part of it. But to your point, I do get rubbed the wrong way by organizations that push things or sell something in order to get you to obviously support their organization. But it's just kind of a part of the game. So push and pull of sorts. But it is a rub, and I appreciate you saying that. I feel the exact same way. I'm like, do I want to monetize something like this, or does that take away from me being 100% myself and being true to myself? But I'm like, at this point, I'm not going to be able to hold like an actual job moving forward. So hopefully my marketing agency and some other things support me as we continue to share this kind of information. But with that, okay, perfect. Great start. Bob Lazar, believable, non-believable? Every bit of his story.
I believe him. I know there was, a lot of criticism because he said he worked at worked for I can't remember the contractor that he worked for,
And they
but
just said he didn't work for him.
yeah, and then it was at Los Alamos Labs,
Mhm.
and they said they don't have a record. And then MIT, he said that he went to MIT. I believe he explained that during the documentary. That he was not a student at MIT, but he audited these classes, these physics classes, and all these higher level classes because of his job that he had. I can't remember if he worked for EG&G or whatever the contractor that he worked for, but they were sending him to these classes at MIT. And that's why he's not on the student registry, or never graduated from it. I don't think he ever claimed that he graduated from MIT. Just some guy auditing a class sitting in the back that maybe, or the professor doesn't even notice.
Right.
So, and then I know George Knapp went with him to, I think, to Los Alamos, or maybe it was Sandia, one of the national labs run by the Department of Energy, and everybody there knew him. So there's a lot of things that Bob Lazar was criticized for that have kind of that were a big deal that now I believe that they've been explained. He produced a W-2. He was in the phone book at one of the national labs. So
It almost makes you wonder, like, why have they not killed this guy yet? It's like that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just like, why have they not, like, why has somebody not, like, silenced him completely at
I
this
think
point?
that if he wasn't so vocal, he might not be around right now. That was his protection.
Yeah.
I know he gets harassed a lot.
Yeah.
When during one of the documentaries that he did with, or maybe it was with Jeremy Corbell, that the FBI raided his business, United Nuclear, while they were doing the documentary.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy to live that way and to keep sharing information too. It's got to be super traumatic. But I guess you get to a certain point where you're like, my skin's so thick, it just is what it is. At this
Right.
point. Okay, cool. Demonic or non-demonic? When people in the religious community don't understand things, they tend to go the demonic route. I'm curious to just know your thoughts on that versus, like, is there, in your opinion, potentially space for, like, demonic energy of sorts versus is it just something they don't fully understand?
I
Or a little bit both.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I believe in demons. I mean, I
Okay.
know there are evil entities. And I guess whether you want to call them demons or angels,
Yeah.
but it really boils down to, what define an angel, and then define an extraterrestrial, and it's like they're the same thing. I mean, do they have good intentions or bad intentions? I guess that's the differentiation between an angel and a demon.
Right.
I do believe that there are entities out there that do not have our best interest in mind, and then there are entities out there that do, and that are looking out for us. And so I would like to believe that there's no demonic element to this, but I guess it really comes down to semantics of, well, what is a demon?
And good and bad energy across
Right.
the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Our government, obviously you watched Disclosure today. We already
I
discussed
did.
this brief.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you believe that it's pretty spot on with its, like, representation of the government knowing it being within private organizations though, and then working together? That's in my opinion, I believe that wholeheartedly, that the government knows, and they've just passed off a lot of information to private entities because of the fact that we now can obviously ask for information from our government, but they can protect themselves by giving it to private organizations, which basically keeps it from the president and other
Yep.
members of our government altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. No access through Freedom of Information Act if it's in the hands of one of these aerospace companies, or Battelle, or Lockheed Martin, and so yeah, I believe that it was probably transferred back in the '60s to avoid just that. And I got to tell you, I'm really disappointed with these three releases. I mean, there are some videos that were released that show some pretty interesting things. We have a team with MUFON that's going through all of them and analyzing them, and we're treating them like a MUFON case that somebody submitted. But there's so much information missing on a lot of them. I've done, I think, 12 or 13 of the videos and some of the documents. The ones from the latest release, there were not that many videos. I did 2 of them. There was the one there with the two orbs behind the trees that I know gets shown on the news a lot. And then the other one was a bright light that was supposedly hovering over the lake for 45 minutes. Without any context to that, to me, they're not really remarkable. I mean, they're easily explainable that the two bright orange lights that are going across the screen. I mean, in Florida, we see those all the time. They're sky lanterns. They've got a very unique look, a very unique color to them, and those things moved exactly like that. Now, supposedly the FBI did their investigation and found these people to be credible, but and that in that particular case, that there was this one orb that was in the backyard, and then it flew up, broke into two pieces, and then flew that, and that's what you see. They see the last part of that in the video. That might be true, but without the background, metadata, location, any of that, to me it looks like sky lanterns.
Right.
And also with the other one, with the craft of the ball of light that was hovering over a lake. I mean, to me that also looks like maybe a camp. It could be a LED lantern or something in the woods. It didn't move for 45 minutes and without any further information. It's just kind of unremarkable. And then, oh my gosh, that release 3, some of the files that I went through, I was expecting some real juicy stuff. I got a declassified CIA document that described the history of the U-2, the A-12 Oxcart, and the SR-71 that was declassified. It's a 402-page PDF document. There's one reference to a UFO that described when they were testing the U-2 spy plane. At the time, they weren't painted black. They were painted, they weren't painted. They were polished aluminum. So at 80,000 feet, they would pick up a glint of, reflection off the sun, and people would think it's a UFO. Another one was a German scientist who wrote a paper that described all of the UFO reports in the 1950s were really German technology. Ridiculous. And then there was the one that got me was they released an interview between Walter Cronkite and Gordon Cooper before his Mercury mission, speculating what the fireflies were that John Glenn saw. I mean, did they have to declassify that and put it out with his release? Like I said, there's some interesting things in there, but it's just complete obfuscation.
Aren't the fireflies, there's something super easy to explain, though? It was like something that came out. It was like a liquid of some kind that shined and made it look like it was actually
either that or it could have been like a heat shield kind of thing. I think there was a prosaic explanation for sure.
Yeah.
What I really want is, back in April, Anna Paulina Luna, House Oversight Committee, she wrote Secretary Hegseth a memo requesting 46 high-resolution color videos that she had been briefed on and observed within a skiff. And she demanded that, or requested that those be released by April 14th. Well, April 14th came and went. May 6th comes around, I think was when the first batch of Pentagon UFO files came out, and then 2 others after that. And, they're all pretty unremarkable, nothing earth-shattering. But I'm hoping that those 46 videos that Representative Luna is talking about, I think if those could get released, that would be incredible. I believe one of them, if I've read the description and it was legit, was a disc-shaped craft that pulls right up to a B-52 that was in flight, so B-52 bomber, pulled up right next to the cockpit window, and the pilots were able to look out. There was a transparent section of the disc, and they could see the occupants inside. I don't know if they were grays or what they were, but and then the thing flies off. I want to see that video. I want to see the documents that confirm that the Roswell crash happened. there's so much stuff that needs to be released, and what we're getting is absolutely ridiculous.
Very surface level. Very
Yep,
surface level. But
absolutely.
to a lot of people in the population, though, it's a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, it's actually being recognized by the government. I've been wrong my entire life. These people that are talking about UFOs might actually be onto something. So I think it is kind of, to a certain degree, it's starting to get people thinking, at least, about the possibility of what else might be out there, because the government is finally putting some credibility behind it. So I think that in and of itself is helpful to a certain degree.
I think we just need to keep the pressure on and keep asking for more. I know that there's probably certain elements within the government that think we'll just feed them all of this, and then we don't have to worry about it for a couple of years. And I hope that's
No,
not the
we
case.
want all of it.
We really need to keep that pressure on. So.
Yeah. We also want to know, JFK, Epstein, lots of these things too. We want all of this information released.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I really appreciate it. I haven't gotten any notification yet of any kind of abduction at the World Cup match. I'm not sure about you, but
no, nothing yet.
But I guess it'll be interesting to go check that out after this. But
sure.
Anything else you want to add this evening? Anything else you think would kind of wrap this episode super nice and tight for us and put maybe a cherry or a bow on top?
Well, I wouldn't be a good MUFON state director if I didn't direct people to visit www.mufon.com. You can join as a member. You can become a field investigator through that website. And then also you can report a sighting and you can report an abduction through that website. So www.mufon.com, it holds all the information.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you again for your time. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Cameron.